Today on the Women Mind the Water Art of It series on womenmindthewater.com, I'm speaking with Indira Brooks, a native of Roatán. Roatán is an island in the Caribbean, about 40 miles off the northern coast of Honduras. Indira is the Social Environmental Program Manager at the Roatán Marine Park. Indira works to protect the island's marine resources. The Women Mind the Water Art of It series podcast on womenmindthewater.com engages artists in conversation about their work and explores their connection with the ocean. Through their stories, Women Mind the Water hopes to inspire and encourage action to protect the ocean and her creatures. I'm speaking with Indira Brooks. Indira's focus at university was audiovisual communication. After graduation and returning to Roatán, her Caribbean island home, Indira's focus has been the conservation of marine ecosystems. Indira works for Roatán Marine Park, a nonprofit dedicated to protecting coral reefs, mangroves, and other marine species. Indira is currently working on an island-wide ban of sunscreens containing petrochemicals. These sunscreens harm Roatán's coral reef, which are second only in size to Australia's Great Barrier Reef. Indira, I am pleased to welcome you to the Women Mind the Water Art of It series podcast. I'd like to talk about Roatán and the work you do to protect its marine resources. You know, I knew nothing about Roatán until Vicki Nichols Goldstein, a past guest on the Women Mind the Water Art of It series podcast, suggested I talk with you. Vicki, who's the founder of the Inland Ocean Coalition, which, and interestingly enough, is based in Colorado, is working with you and others on the sunscreen ban. We will talk about that ban later in the podcast, but before we do, let's learn something about you and Roatán. In preparing for this podcast, I discovered that Roatán is an island in the Caribbean near the northeastern coast of Honduras. Roatán is approximately 40 miles long and 3 miles wide, and yet it is home to the largest barrier reef in the northern hemisphere. Because of its natural resources and tropical temperatures, Roatán is a popular destination for cruise ships, with over more than 100 that arrive in port annually. Indira, give us a more personal view of life on Roatán. How has the Caribbean shaped your worldview?
Hi, Pam. Well, thanks for having me. Honestly, it's an honor to be featured on this amazing platform where so many women have came and told their stories and have shared what they're working on. So to get ready and talk about a bit about the life on an island or an island in the Caribbean, honestly, I like to think it as being the best of both worlds. So on one hand, you have homey, friendly family vibe where practically everyone knows everyone, small communities that are close knit, some really more traditional than others, and with an incredible local cuisine that is to die for. But on the other hand, we're also a touristic destination. So we have a lot of tourists and visitors that come in and some stay and they become a part of their culture, and they also bring a lot of different aspects and elements that come to add a different twist to it.
So when you were a youngster, what impact did the presence of the Caribbean have on your lessons? For example, did your school take field trips to the water's edge, and what did you do there?
It's funny, Pam, because you would actually think so, but honestly it's not quite common for us and at least growing up to be able to even talk about some of these topics. For example, I remember that when I was in school, we would learn, of course, about scientific topics in our science class, but like the basic stuff. But even though we're in an island surrounded by these amazing marine ecosystems such as mangroves, seagrass, coral reef, they never learned much about them. Some of the kids really don't even get into contact with these ecosystems until they're maybe over 18 because they might live far away from the beach, or they might not have access to be able to buy masks and fins to be able to snorkel, for example, or even just because it's for some communities that are a bit more traditional, they have a way of seeing the ocean or the sea like something that they are very respectful of. So if they're going, when they go to the beach, they're just gonna get in the water, maybe 15, 20 minutes, then they're gonna come out and they're just going to be at the shore. So they never really experience or come into contact with that underwater world that is so amazing. And like with everything in your life or everything in the world, if you really don't get to know it, come into contact with it, you can love it. You can fall in love with it. And if you don't fall in love with it, it's hard to really understand it and be able to be aware of what it needs and why it's important for it to be protected. So I like to think about it like a chain. So it's all connected. And once we take those kids, for example, here at Roatán Marine Park, and part of our education program, we do for example field trips to either to plant mangroves or to what we call an underwater boat, where the kids can go in and they see the reef from inside the boat. And some kids were amazed. They've been living here their entire life and they've never seen something like that. And it's funny because you go and you tell this to, or share these stories with people on the mainland, and they're always like, this is funny. Like they don't understand how can this be possible, you having the sea or access to the ocean and not really coming into contact with it. But it's something that happens, and that's why awareness and education programs, not only for us at NGOs, but also to finding a way to integrate this information into the national curriculum is so important.
I think that perspective is really important to everyone because you can live very close to the sea and not know it or appreciate it. So when you're inland, like in Colorado, how can you expect that anybody would care because it's so far away? And yet you can live so close and not know it. So growing up, what sort of ecological issues do you remember residents being concerned with?
So, that's a pretty good question, because where I am right now, and in the position and the environment that I'm working with, we hear a lot about these big worldwide issues: climate change, ocean acidification, and all these different topics. But when you go into the communities, and when I go back to my home and my house, and I talk to my neighbors and remember all these topics, the communities are really facing simple problems and subjects of, for example, waste management, water and sanitation, things that for others might be so basic, are things that we consider so critical, and still up to today we still have these issues in the community. Yeah, it's really sad when you go into the communities and some don't have this proper system. Of course, the local government has been working in the last few years hard to tackle these issues, but it's still a constant struggle because there's just so much to be done. And as we move on and more people move to the island and the number of residents increase, it's just the workload also increases. But yeah, I think the two major issues would have to be when it comes to the local communities, and the ones I remember growing up would be waste management and water and sanitation, the basic needs.
I understand that. So given all the issues like the infrastructure and water and sanitation, what led to the decision to focus on petrochemical sunscreens or sunscreens with petrochemicals in them?
It's actually funny because when it comes to petrochemical sunscreen, it's actually one of the ways that we can empower people to be able to make a difference in a small action. Water, sanitation, waste management, they are honestly really more complex issues. But just telling for a person to make that conscious decision of not buying this sunscreen or wearing this on this other preferring this other brand is type or using alternative methods instead of using sunscreen, if that person and group of people can take that decision and change their behavior, we can also create an impact in the ocean, in our ecosystems. And it's also something that is in our hands as citizens. It's not that macro as waste management or water and sanitation that you need like millions of dollars or lempiras to be able to solve this issue. This is something that is fairly cheap and also something that can have a big impact. And literally the the decision or the impact it is in your hands as a resident or a visitor. Like you saying no to sunscreen, you looking or going over the ingredients and being a conscious consumer is so important. This is something, specifically petrochemical sunscreen is something that can have a high or big impact on our reef.
How much impact is the ban likely to have on Roatán's marine environment? Aren't there other issues that have a greater impact on the environment?
So on a daily basis, we have on average more than 87,000 liters of petrochemical sunscreen going into our reef.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot. And these sunscreen contain chemicals that are harming the DNA of our corals, that are also helping to cause coral bleaching, that are preventing or also deforming the development of fish larvae and different issues within our reef. So if we can take those 87,000 a daily average of chemicals going into our reef and make and improve at the same time improve the water quality, that would be amazing.
That is truly breathtaking. That statistic.
It's really an incredible number. And that's why we think this topic is honestly so important, because no one talks about sunscreen. And right now we're talking about sunscreen, but there are a lot of other products, conditioners, creams that people normally put on their product when they go to the beach. But it's not only when you're going to the beach, it's even if you're at home and you're taking a bath, because some of these waters still end up in the reef. So it's a bit by bit adding, and us from each place where we're at, being able to take a bit out of what's harming the reef to be able to help it.
What obstacles will there be in achieving compliance? Do you think locals are ready to comply? And what about all the people, all the tourists that come by boat and plane?
So when it comes specifically to compliance, and from locals, is actually something tricky, because locals here on the island don't actually use that much sunscreen. Like maybe I would say it's this new young generation that are more like aware and conscious, but if everyone like over 25 or over 30 really doesn't use much sunscreen. So it's mostly targeted. The difficult aspect is going to be making sure that the visitors and the tourists do comply. And the idea within the ban is to be able to ban the sale here on the island. So you're not going to be able to find any sunscreen that contains petrochemical, but the only challenge we're going to have is being able to manage the ones that are being brought into the island with the tourists. So if they come and they bring their own sunscreen, that's we're still working the points on how we're going to deal with that. But I think it's a great starting point to be able to first prohibit the sale on the island and make sure that the stores and everyone within the touristic industry understand why this is important, and no one should have this in their gift shop or at the supermarket or at the gas station, at any place. These type of products should not be sold.
So given the immensity of the work that goes into protecting Roatán's marine resources, what gives you hope? what keeps you positive and moving forward? I know you said that there's a lot of negativity because of the immensity of getting clean water and sanitation, but for you to keep going and smile and laugh and take on this immense issue of starting a sunscreen ban, what gives you positive, what gives you hope?
I think for me personally, it's just knowing that it's it's a work that has to be done.
Mm-hmm.
We have to keep going. We have this responsibility because we have been so fortunate to be able to, at least for me, to be able to born and be a part of this community. And this is my island. Like I have a responsibility to work towards protecting it. I've been given this gift. So if I'm not able to sacrifice a bit of me to get the work done, who else would be willing to do it? It's just thinking, I guess, on the greater good and knowing that even though we're in difficult time, for example, right now we're seeing a wave of coral bleaching, and it's kind of depressing sometimes because we work year long, for example, monitoring the corals spawning and doing different coral restoration efforts, and it's just the corals come and like we don't no fault of our own, they start to bleach, and you're just like, oh. Sometimes you feel like that all this effort is being wasted, but at the end of the day, it's work that has to be done. It's work that is needed. And if we're not doing it, if we're not doing it, who else is going to do it? If we don't stand up and work to ensure that the future generations still have, even in the smallest slight chance of seeing the reef as it is today, then who else is going to do it?
Well, I cannot imagine the frustration and the pain. And yet, as you say, if you don't try and do it now, it's all lost. So you've got to keep in there, Indira. You really do.
Sometimes it feels like an uphill battle, or that you're going like against the current. But you just have to continue. You just have to keep on because it's important, and you're really making a difference.
Yes.
And something that really motivates me is seeing, like, when I come into contact with kids. So I try to be involved with a lot of activities with the children, because I feel like once, like, you're explaining them or talking to them about the corals, and their face is just lighting up, and you're just having or seeing that positive impact in their faces, that gives me more hope and more energy and positive vibes to be able to continue.
So what advice do you have for listeners who are working to make others see the importance of protecting marine resources?
I think in first place, you have to believe it. And if you're not really committed to the cause, if you're not really doing it for the right reasons, if you're not drinking the same medicine you're selling, it's really difficult to be able to create or move these people that you're talking to or you're working with towards the action that you want them to do. So it starts from within you as a person being fully committed to the cause.
Indira, I'm really glad that you joined me on this episode of the Women Mind the Water Artivist Series podcast. I enjoyed learning something about Roatán and the work you are doing to conserve the island's natural resources.
Thank you for having me, Pam. It's only been a pleasure to be able to be here and share a bit about what we're doing here at Roatán Marine Park. I want to invite all listeners to they can visit our website, also follow us on social media, so official Roatán Marine Park or www.roatanmarinepark.org. And even though we weren't able to cover everything that we do, they can find out more by just subscribing to our mailing list.
Very good. I will also put it up on the website. So if you couldn't get it down when Indira was saying it, we'll have it there for you to be able to come back to and review. I'd like to remind listeners that I've been speaking with Indira Brooks, who works to protect the marine resources of the second largest reef system in the world. Indira is the latest guest on the Women Mind the Water Artemis Series podcast. Our next guest will be Jada Alexander, who uses ocean-based activities to promote mental and emotional well-being. You can learn more about our next guest, Jada Alexander, at daybreakbeachclub.com. The Women Mind the Water Artemis Series podcast can be viewed on womenmindthewater.com, Museum on Main Street, and YouTube. An audio-only version of this podcast is available on womenmindthewater.com, on iTunes, and Spotify. Women Mind the Water is grateful to Jane Rice for the use of her song, Women of Water. All rights for the Women Mind the Water name and logo belong to Pam Ferris Olson. This is Pam Ferris Olson.